Welcome back to the North Tonawanda Football Hall of Fame YouTube channel. We have another terrific guest for us today. This gentleman had a lot of success on the gridiron and also on the baseball diamond for the North Tonawanda Lumberjacks. Played in the late 1980s, graduated in 1990 from his home in southeast Pennsylvania near Philadelphia. It's the one and only Mike Snopkowski. How are you today?
I'm great, Ed. How you doing?
Good, good, good. Thanks so much for joining me today. For people who aren't familiar with you and your brother Jeff, give us a little bit of your background growing up at NT.
Yeah, so I graduated 1990. As you mentioned, my brother, I was the older of the two of us. Grew up on Castle Bar Drive, moved in when I was about 5 months. My mom is still living in the house 52 years later. Grew up really, simply. My grandparents lived over on the avenues on my mom's side, my dad's side on the other side of town. Everybody on both sides of the family, came from the motherland. So there were a lot of traditions that we grew up with. There was a lot of fun. My mom was one of three sisters. She was the oldest, and there were eight boys among the three sisters. So you can imagine Thanksgiving and Christmas and whatnot were a lot of fun inside the house. And then when you ended up outside in the street playing touch football or in someone's basement playing floor hockey, there were a lot of really good memories.
You and your brother Jeff, were there any other siblings in your family?
No, it was just the two of us.
Talk about playing youth sports. Were you guys there from the sandlot, or did you play organized football,
So,
organized baseball?
yeah, so actually, the first sport that I played growing up was actually hockey. I started playing open skate, just kind of learning how to stay upright over at Tonawanda Ice Time, which right now, behind the high school, I think it might be a bus garage or something like that. But started there, and actually, that was the first organized sports that I played in. I started when I was on the pond at 4, and then I started playing organized when I was 5 over there on Niagara Falls Boulevard, over there in Wheatfield. I didn't actually start playing organized baseball until I was 8. This was before T-ball and before coach pitch and all of that. So the youngest that you could be in play was 8. And I didn't actually start playing football until I was an 8th grader at Resel Junior High. So I spent most of my time playing football. It would have been at the corner. It's still an empty lot. You can see it today. It's on the corner of Meadow and Nash. That empty lot is where we would meet in the neighborhood, and we would end up playing for hours, it seemed. And we used that for football. We used that for baseball. And then, obviously, as you got a little bit older, you had more chances to play Little League and things like that. So that was growing up. There were a lot of hours spent down the street.
Eighth grade at Resel, going out for freshman football. What position were you put in, or what position did you play?
So I think you had it right the first time. It was at that time the two coaches were Coach Fran Burke and Coach Dave Anastasi. They were both teachers at Resel, and at that time Resel was a 7, 8, 9 junior high. So during the 7th grade, had a chance to have Coach Burke for PE. I never had Coach Anastasi for math, but over the course of the year, Coach Burke kept talking and talking about coming out for football. So that following August, at the beginning of the school year, first time playing organized football, he literally took me, set me down behind some cones and said, "Watch this guy." And it turned out it was an inside linebacker. And on offense, it was a fullback. So he had me pegged right off the bat for fullback and inside linebacker, and didn't play a ton my 8th grade year. Didn't deserve to. Was just trying to learn and understand the game. Played a little bit on offense, and then learned a lot. And then obviously kept at it. And then in 9th grade, had a chance to play a little bit more. We had a pretty good team, and just really remember Coach Burke and Coach Anastasi just really giving me a great introduction to football. And they were going about it all the right way. It was a lot of fun learning. It was hard, but it was a lot of fun.
What made it being the right way? That's an interesting statement that you made. What made it be that way, the right way?
Yeah, well, honestly, Coach Burke and Coach Anastasi, they right off the bat, you just liked them as people. You could tell that they were looking out for you as a person, as a student. They always talked about doing the right things in the classroom. They really wanted you to be the best that you could be as an individual. And then football came from that. They had very high expectations. And I think because those expectations didn't change, whether you were a starter, whether you were a second or third stringer, they just consistently expected you to be your best. And it wasn't just about what was happening on the football field. Coach Burke and Coach Anastasi, because they were in the building, they'd see you in the hallways. They'd expect you to behave the right way in class. They talked to other teachers. They would talk to you if something got back to them that shouldn't have gotten back to them. And it was a great introduction to that part of interscholastic athletics and having the opportunity to learn from them. I didn't know it at the time, but Coach Burke and my one aunt had graduated from high school together. And you know how things are in NT, everybody knows everybody. So, when my parents would say, don't do anything wrong because we're going to find out, it was very true. And Coach Burke and Coach Anastasi, they just, like I said, they just did things the right way. And I had a chance to meet, at that time, the freshmen who I was playing with turned out to be the seniors on the team when I was a junior, when we ended up at Rich Stadium. So getting a chance to play a little bit with them, I didn't play a lot, but practiced with them, getting to know them. It was a great way to start to build the relationships that I think ended up really helping us by the time I got to be a junior and the other guys got to be seniors.
Talk about your sophomore year. Did you stay on the JV or did you get moved up, or what was that experience like?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I got moved up to the varsity as a sophomore. So I played a little bit on offense, still at fullback, but on defense, pretty much started, from the beginning of the season. I did play a little bit more on offense early because at that time our fullback, Tom Cavanaugh, he had an injury, so he wasn't even able to play the season opener. So you can imagine, I think it was at Ken West. It was a really warm Saturday in September, and I remember the first play from scrimmage. They called a dive up the middle. I got stuck right at the line of scrimmage and almost got flipped upside down. And that was my first play on the varsity gridiron, and I don't think I touched the ball again that day. So, it was a lot of learning when I was a sophomore. Played with some really good players at that time. I think we had a good team that year. We ended up losing in the first round of playoffs at Orchard Park. But learned a lot and learned really about what the big difference was between playing freshmen, where things were a lot easier when I was a ninth grader on the freshman team. At that time, I was bigger than most of the people, probably just as fast or faster. Moving up and playing varsity as a sophomore was a big step up. I had to learn a lot more about football. I had to learn more about conditioning, getting in shape, things of that nature. But really appreciate the opportunity. One of the coaches on the team that year was Coach Chisera, who obviously had his own history in NFL and NT lore. It was nice learning from him and just the group of people who were there. Once again, it was, about you as a person first and football second.
Your varsity coach was George Dermisic, the head coach.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really talked about him on this channel. And it escapes me why we have it, but I'm going to pick your brains about what was your experience like with Coach Dermisic?
So Coach Dermisic, I think if I was going to talk about maybe the quintessential head coach, he would probably be the head coach who delegated a lot to his assistants. So I remember him working a ton with the offense, and early on, I didn't do a lot on the offensive side of the ball. So I spent a lot more of my time on the defensive side. So I would remember, maybe more so on the scrimmages and things of that nature. Coach Dermisic. Now, he was also a teacher at NT High. He was a PE teacher. So I had him a couple of the years that I was there. Had a chance to see a lot more of him during the summer between what would have been my sophomore year and my junior year, with the summer workouts and getting the group together, kind of like what would be now 7-on-7, but we were just doing it much more informally. And he really focused, most of his attention on the offensive side of the ball. He did a lot of the play calling, and I think, Coach Dermisic, he had good people around him that really were in line with what he was trying to do. At that time, Coach Anastasi had moved back up to the varsity level. Coach Sheasley, Coach Hopkins, they were really involved with the day-to-day and with what was going on at practice and whatnot. So those were probably the coaches I spent more of my time learning from.
When did you start getting a lot of serious playing time as a fullback? Was it your junior year?
Yeah, it was the junior year. Tom Cavanaugh, who was a senior when I was a sophomore, he had graduated. And so we really, I think at the end of that sophomore year, I think we kind of recognized that we might have an opportunity to do some really good things. Coach Anastasi really pushed us to get into the weight room and spend a lot of time with our conditioning during the course of that off season. It would have been my sophomore year, the other guys' junior years. I think we had a pretty good summer and being able to get together and do some things. And really right off the bat, things kind of started to click. I had an opportunity to do quite a bit as a fullback. I was a starting fullback that year and got moved to outside linebacker and ended up starting both ways. Outside linebacker was new, so there were some growing pains there. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. But there were a lot of really talented football players. I mean, Joe Anastasi was our quarterback. Corey Zayats was one of our ends. Eric Novosat was a tight end. Greg Sarratori and Rich Kornacki were running backs. We had multiple high-quality linemen across the front. And there was a lot of talent there to work with. And that was when things started going. I think we started to realize after about the first or second week when things weren't easy, but we could tell that we had something good. That really, I think, fueled us, moving forward for the rest of that season.
You had a terrific junior season for sure. A couple bumps in the road against Lancaster. One during the regular season where I believe you were hurt for the first game, and then at Rich Stadium in the Federation game where you lost 14-3. Mm-hmm. How frustrating was that for those losses and that season to come to an end?
Well, it was really frustrating because I think, as you said, for me personally, I was injured prior to the Lancaster game. So while I got out there, I was only able to play on offense, and I really wasn't at 100%. I had tweaked my knee a couple games earlier, and the game was at Lancaster. I'm not going to say we outplayed them, but when we made a mistake, they capitalized. When they made a mistake, we might not have. When we came back and saw them again at Rich, I don't think anyone felt that they were the better team going into the game, but the scoreboard doesn't lie. They beat us twice that year. The second game, certainly when it mattered most, 14-3. And we had our opportunities, we had our chances, and we just probably didn't capitalize on them the way we could have. It was frustrating because I think it was a very senior laden team. I don't remember exactly off the top of my head, but I would guess probably of 11 starters on offense, there were maybe only 2 or 3 of us who were underclassmen. And on defense, it was probably 3, maybe 4 at the most. So we knew that there was going to be some very big shoes to fill. It was a great opportunity for us, and we just didn't quite get it across the finish line.
Your senior year, you also lost those seniors. Describe your senior year. What type of year was it?
It was disappointing. I think we went 2-6. I think we lost our first game. We went into the season ranked number 1 in the preseason poll in the Buffalo News, and then we went to West Seneca. What would that have been? West Seneca East, I believe. Played against Kevin Mason, who ended up at Syracuse, Division I quarterback, and he handled us pretty well. I think it was 28-7 or something like that. We came back and won the next 2 games and then ended our season by losing 5 in a row, including the TNT game. So, I think our senior year, we had talent. I think we had a lot of people who could play. But quite honestly, when I talk with some friends about how that season went, we end up talking for us, our senior year, and for some of the other guys who were a year younger, we spend a lot more time talking about baseball that season than we end up talking about football. I think where my junior year, it was a very good football team and the athletes were football players. I feel like maybe my senior year, we had a number of very good athletes on the team, but we weren't probably football players first. And I think that, that caught up to us, especially in the TNT game where we kind of got rocked a little bit.
I was just going to ask you about your TNT experience. You did lose your senior year. I believe you won your junior year. But overall, what was that experience like for you?
It was amazing. I won't have anything to compare it to. Even having played Division I baseball and gotten to the regionals for the College World Series, and it was just different. I mean, I've had an opportunity to watch some of the other videos you've created. I've heard the word pageantry. I've heard the word tradition. I think what made it so special was it was literally the entire community. There wasn't anybody who didn't know what to expect TNT week. And one of the things that I thought was so special was you didn't have to be a football player or a cheerleader or in the marching band to get into it and to enjoy it. We had pride days at school. We had a parade on Friday. I remember teachers in the parking lot cooking chowder after the car parade, and it really was the entire community. My sophomore year, we played at home, and it was the year before our really good season. Tonawanda didn't have a strong record coming in, but realistically, they probably should have been up by 2 touchdowns at the half. One of their running backs was going in untouched for a touchdown. The ball slipped off of his rib pad. We recovered on like our 10-yard line. And then we had a goal line stand right before halftime. They had, I think it was 1st and goal at the 2, and we ended up keeping them out of the end zone. And that game could have gone in another direction. And then the following year at Clint Small, it was very similar. Tonawanda, I believe, was up at the half. And then we came back and had a very good second half. I think we won 17-6 or 17-7, something like that. And I just remember it being deafening. I just remember it seemed like 20 people deep around the field. We had one of our series, we were down near the scoreboard end zone at Clint Small, and we were trying to call, Joe Anastasi was trying to call cadence, and you couldn't hear him because the people were literally just packed around the end zone screaming. And it was just amazing. It was electric. It was really something special. So I always say, football, when I think about the sports I played most, football was the one where I enjoyed the games the most. I enjoyed baseball practice. Hockey was the one that I loved first, but the football games were the things that I most remember from high school. And I think those games had an awful lot to do with that.
You were named third team to the third team All-State one year. I believe your senior year was that?
I believe so.
Yeah, by the New York State Sportswriters Association. That's a big deal. What did that mean to you?
Obviously you enjoy being recognized and acknowledged for what you do. You never do it by yourself. So going back to the people who were around me, there were really good players around me who helped me to become who I was. One of my best friends to this day, Paul Gansas, was an inside linebacker on that team. It was really nice that we had a chance to play right next to each other. I was kind of inside and outside for a little bit, but we had a chance to play right next to each other for 4 or 5 games that season. And when we were watching the videos that get posted and we watch a little bit of our senior year, when we get together every now and again, it's fun to sit on the couch and watch it with him. And he has different memories because he had a different view of things. But that was a year that, I think when you're playing a team sport, you want the team to be the best it can be. And at 2-6, that probably wasn't something that, we would remember. I think more that year at the end of year banquet for the Section 6 football, they used to host it over in Cheektowaga, and John Murphy. I remember the year that I was a senior, he was the MC of the event. And I honestly, I remember more that year. I was fortunate. I was honored with the Phil McConkey Award for athletics and academics combined. And that was really special because I tried to take a lot of pride. My parents expected a lot from me in the classroom. My teachers did as well. And that was something really nice to be recognized for, as being not just a very strong football player for that fall, but also being a top student in the classroom.
Did you have any aspirations of playing college football, or was it going to be baseball all the way?
It was kind of interesting because I didn't get a lot of looks for baseball until well into my senior year spring. So I was playing my senior football season well before things with baseball started to heat up. So there were a number of schools who came in, had an opportunity to give me, some time of theirs and talk to me a little bit about what it would mean to play. Honestly, the two that I remember the most, one day I got called out of math class. The phone rang. My math teacher was Mr. Mahoney, and he said, "All right, you got to head down to guidance again." And he's like, "Guess who it is today?" And I said, "I don't know who." He said, "Harvard." And so that was, walking down, at that time I'm 17 years old, and you just imagine, what that means and what the name of that school is. And, about a week and a half later, I had an opportunity to talk with one of the coaches from Yale. And it was a really humbling experience, thinking about what that would have meant at that time. I applied to both schools, and quite honestly, I didn't get in. And that probably wouldn't have been for me, my pathway anyways. But still, it was, at that time, it was a really humbling experience, knowing that that those opportunities were kind of being placed in front of me, and it was a combination of not just doing well on the football field, but also doing well in the classroom.
Well, from what I read, he had a 1310 SAT score, a solid A student, and you broke all the ideas of being a dumb jock by all stretches of the imagination. So, hey, I want to fast forward to your baseball season, your baseball career at NT. Started off as a third baseman, decided let's try catching, and the rest was history. As a senior, you hit at 594 clip, 30 RBI, and 9 home runs in high school baseball is a phenomenal stat in and of itself. What was baseball like for you at NT?
Baseball, well, going back to kind of what we talked about earlier, I had started playing organized baseball when I was 8, and at that time there were the two sides of the town. Really, they were kind of split down the middle by Division Street, and so you had the American and the national side of North Tonawanda. The Nationals, that they played over right there at the corner of Wheatfield and right by old Colonel Payne. And then we played at Ramsey Field down a little farther on Erie. And so starting in, when I was 8, when I was 9, 10, started playing with the same guys year after year, because you'd get on a team and you'd be on the same team for 3 years. You'd grow up with the team, and then there'd be some guys who would leave because they'd age out or new guys would come in. And what I thought was wonderful was getting to the high school level. And many of the guys I had an opportunity to play with when I was 8, 9, 10, we started playing in all-star tournaments when we were 10, 11, 12. Many of those same guys were the guys I played varsity ball with. And so it was really where football for me started later. And, it was a kind of a different combination of people. Really, baseball for me, my sophomore, junior, and senior year was really a culmination of 7 or 8 years playing ball with the same group of guys. So we had a lot of fun. Where I talked about football, we had good athletes, but they weren't football players. Many of the guys I played baseball with were on the football team, but we were good athletes who were baseball first. So we really had a good time. My sophomore year, I was able to play varsity. I had played JV as a 9th grader for Coach Merlo, who was an amazing coach, amazing person. And then had an opportunity to play for Coach Mike Eberwein starting in my sophomore year, and did that. Junior year, we went to Pilot Field. We got beat by Orchard Park at Pilot Field our junior year. And we were probably, I think most of us on the team felt we were a year away. We felt like we had a lot of makings, the same way that, when I was talking about earlier, we had a lot of seniors on the team when I was, or there were seniors when I was a junior for the football team. When I was a junior, we had a lot of juniors and sophomores. I think we might have only had 1 or 2 seniors who were in our starting 9. And so when we came back for our senior year, we really felt like we had a team that could do some damage. And we had a good year. It was a great blend of offense and defense. We had great pitching. Ed Mahoney and Rob Peters, I think they were both undefeated on the mound. We had really strong defense. We had a very good offense. And it was kind of one of those things. Baseball is very much a confidence game. We had a really good start. We actually started in the snowflakes. I can't remember who we were playing, but it was literally snowing our first game in April. It was at the end of spring break. Maybe it was even right after spring break. And I want to say, we won like 17-4, 17-5 or something like that. And that kind of just springboarded us into the year. And the year went really, really well.
I've read where there was a debate whether you were going to go to college and maybe play college baseball or be drafted out of high school. But the scouts said that you were too smart to be drafted because you had the aspirations of going to college. We talked earlier about urban legend and myth. How true was that, that the scouts didn't want to bother drafting you when you were 18 years, 17, 18 years old because they knew they couldn't get you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I'd like to believe some of that was true. My senior year, it was really interesting having an opportunity to look out of the dugout or look behind the backstop and see someone wearing like a Dodgers cap or a Padres cap, and then meet them after the game and find out that they were a scout. There were a number of different teams that came out during the course of the year. I was very fortunate that I feel like I got to know them as people again. Especially at that time, it was Bob Miskey, who was the coach, or excuse me, the scout for the Dodgers, and Gus Hine, who covered Western New York and whatnot for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And they both had an opportunity. We spent a lot of time talking after games and whatnot. And I kind of heard back through the grapevine. It was actually through Joe Merlo, who was my JV coach and had a lot of connections in the area. He was one of the people who came back and made the comment. He's like, you keep telling everyone you want to go to college, you're making yourself too expensive, because they would have to pay, the equivalent of what would be like a, tuition. And I said, it's really important to me. It was something that, talking with my parents when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, the focus was always on doing really well in the classroom, and I really, I don't know that I'd be where I am today without my parents giving me that support, knowing that it was that important, having really wonderful teachers along the way. And then going back to my coaches, like this was at a time, and I know things have changed a little bit. This was at a time when pretty much every coach that you had going through the NT school system was also a teacher in the buildings. I mean, it was a different era. My baseball coaches, I talked about it, Norm Hebler was my freshman baseball coach at Resel. He was a teacher in the district. I learned from Coach Merlo. Coach Merlo, actually, he was a 4th grade teacher. I remember him from elementary school. I didn't have him, but he was one of my elementary school, teachers, or at least in the building. And then I had Mike Eberwein, who was a math teacher at the high school. My football coaches were all teachers. And that meant a lot. And I think, and it's unfortunate. I'm in education and I've seen how things have changed, but it's just unfortunate that more of people who could have an impact in the classroom as well as on the fields, there just may not be as many of them as there were when I was growing up. And I guess maybe looking back, I was incredibly fortunate to learn and grow up with the people who I had a chance to learn from. I mean, a lot of them, when I think about who I wanted to be as a coach, and, I've had the chance to get into leadership and education and whatnot, I still think about lessons I've learned from different coaches along the way. And it's made me who I am. And it was very unique. It was a wonderful opportunity for me. And I consider myself blessed for having had those experiences with those men.
When and where did you develop the home run swing? Nine
Um,
bombs in your senior year. That's you in a lot of high school areas. If you get 3, maybe 4, that's a lot. But 9 in one season, and we're talking 1990, 30 some odd years ago.
mhm. Well, I don't know that I ended up really with a home run swing. Um, but how, like I said, sometimes you just kind of get in a groove. I got in a groove my senior year, and playing at Rojek, it wasn't the deepest fences that we played at. I think it was about 365 or something like that. It's the same dimensions that it is now. I mean, you could see it. So it definitely helped that it wasn't exactly 400 to center field to try to get it out of there. But one of those things, like I said, you kind of get some confidence, and you just can't wait to get in the box. And there was a point in time where I knew, because we had such a good team, that I didn't have to be the guy. And I can't tell you how great that was to be able to hit, the 2 Mahoney twins. They were on the team. I already mentioned Paul Gansas. Steve Lucas Savage played third base for us. I mean, you could go down that roster, and there probably were 5 or 6 guys, including myself, who anytime they stepped up to the plate, they could hit a double in the gap or they could hit a home run. And playing with guys who had that high of quality to their game didn't mean that any one person at any one time had to carry the team. Even if you felt like you might be having one of those days and everybody had them, you just knew that somebody else was going to pick you up. You didn't have any pressure on you. So maybe the second or third time you went up, you just settled in, you relaxed, and you just were able to put a good swing on the ball. So that was something that, really made that season special. It made it, I hate to say easy, because it wasn't easy, but it was, because you just knew, I mean, really up until our last game against Jamestown, you just knew that there was somebody was going to do something to get the team going again. And we just never doubted that we were going to be the team that was going to come out on top.
You end up going to Ohio University. What type of other offers did you have, or feelers, and better yet, why did you settle on Ohio U?
Well, it was kind of an interesting process because, as I said, I didn't really get things moving on the pro side until my senior year. Like, once again, this is long before showcases and college camps and things of that nature. So I was really probably, I mean, the school that I had the most interest in me, got to me earliest, was Allegheny College down in Meadville. And that was, for the longest time, probably the school, even as a Division III small liberal arts school, that was most likely where I was gonna end up. And then about halfway through my senior year, when things really started to pick up, I got a few more letters, a few more calls. But quite honestly, by happenstance, I think it's an amazing story of just how sometimes things that you have nothing to do with break in your favor. There at Ohio University, there were two catchers who were both sophomores when I was a senior in high school. They were brought in, and basically the situation was, who's going to win the job. And the one who won at the end of his sophomore year meant he had 2 more years ahead of him where he was going to be the starter. The other one, who didn't win the job, and to this day I don't even know what his name was, he decided he was going to transfer. And at the end of the season, it was about the second or third week of May, he went in and told the coaching staff that he was leaving. And at that time, there's not a whole lot of people who haven't made commitments to go to school at the Division I level. Most people would be deciding in November and December. And so by good fortune, the coach at Ohio University, Joe Carbone, he contacted a couple people who he knew from his time as a scout and doing some stuff at the major league level. He had a ton of contacts. And the way the story was told to me, he called 3 or 4 people, and each one of them mentioned my name, that I might be someone he'd be interested in talking to and watching play, because at that time I was only committed to a Division III school. So I got a call from him out of nowhere. It was about the second half of May. I made the mistake of saying, "Oh, the Buckeyes," not realizing it was Ohio University instead of Ohio State, and had a conversation with him. He came up. He was supposed to watch us play our first round playoff game, but we ended up, the teams that we were supposed to play against, there was a play-in game. They got rained out the day before. So the day we were supposed to play, and the only day he could come and actually watch me compete, the other teams who we were playing against were playing the play-in game. So he came to a practice, had an opportunity to watch me at practice. We went through kind of the normal drills and everything else. He came back to the house. We had some dinner together. I think my dad did hot dogs and hamburgers on the grill. And he kind of gave me a heads up as to what he was thinking. He ended up taking my transcripts, went back to Ohio University, talked to a couple people as well on the academic side, and then communicated with me just a little short while later that he was going to be offering me a partial athletic scholarship and a partial academic scholarship. And so literally in a period of about 5 to 7 days, having not heard from Ohio University, I had an offer in hand. It was going to be an amazing opportunity. And as soon as the season was done, the season ended, and then I kind of had my own things to do with, exams and whatnot and preparing for graduation. I had an opportunity to fly out to Columbus. He picked me up at the Columbus airport, went and spent 3 days, or 2 days, I should say, in Athens. Absolutely loved it. It's the quintessential college town, brick buildings and just wonderful atmosphere, even during the summer. Came back, talked with my parents, and called him up and said, "I'm coming." So it was a very quick process. It was not a long and drawn out recruitment by any stretch. And like I said, it was probably as much luck as anything else that things broke the way they did for me.
When you decide to play college baseball, does the interest from the major league scouts dwindle? Does it wane? Do they still continue to follow you?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the college level, you're seeing a more finished product than you are seeing at the high school level, obviously, because there's more games, there's more. I mean, college coaches, they're coaching at the college level because many of them have played high level college. They may have played in the minor leagues or even the professionals. So you get a different level of teaching at the college level. And certainly the scouts, they find the people whom they want. You know, I was fortunate to play with a few players who got drafted. I played against a number of players who ended up major leaguers. And that was really exciting. So scouts were always around. I think one of the things that I kind of learned after the fact was, you know, as you get older, there's kind of a different calculus. You know, when you're 18 and you can go into the minor leagues, they have more time to work with you, train you, get you to be who they want you to be. And then, you know, you have a potentially longer career. When you're 22, it's a little bit different. You know, and my college career, I didn't play much my first 2 years. I was behind an outstanding catcher. When I got a chance to play my junior year, I made the most of it as a catcher, but didn't hit really well. It was funny. I mean, the things that I did well in high school, just they didn't work at the college level, and had to put a lot of effort into making that right. And then by my senior year, things kind of fell into place. I had a good senior year for me. Once again, it was a very good team to be around. My freshman year, I didn't play much, but we qualified for the regionals for the College World Series. That was an amazing experience, going to the University of Florida and being one of 6 teams that were there and playing against future major leaguers. That was unbelievable. And then my sophomore and my senior year, we made the conference championships. So those were all great experiences. I met a ton of really good people. You know, and quite honestly, when you say, you know, picking Ohio, you know, I'm married to the girl I started dating when I was at Ohio. We just celebrated 25 years a couple of weeks ago. Have 5 beautiful kids. So, you know, whoever that catcher was who decided to transfer somewhere way back in time, I probably owe him a beer or something.
That's a terrific story. Settle the story whether you were drafted or not drafted by the Dodgers in 1994.
No, I was not drafted. That's kind of an urban legend that I think just has, you know, somehow got out there and stayed out there. The Dodgers are one of the teams where, you know, I said Bob Miskey, who was their scout, he probably saw 5 or 6 of my games my senior year, and one of the ones who spent the most of the time talking with me. But no, it never happened. The draft happened not long after I would have finished playing my senior year. I didn't get drafted, went on, played in college and did all of that. And it wasn't something that came my way after those opportunities in my senior year. I don't regret it for a moment. It's just, you know, that just my pathways changed a little bit, and that opportunity never came back around again.
I got to ask you this: how hard was it to take off the baseball spikes and the hat and the uniform, as well as the football cleats, the pads, and the helmet?
When all was said and done, it wasn't easy. I was, you know, playing baseball. I'll talk about that more so. Playing baseball, I was lucky. Coach Eberwein introduced me to some people, and so after my sophomore year, I was able to start playing in the suburban men's league, playing with guys on my team who were in their mid-20s. They were, you know, some of them were in their mid-30s, guys who were really good. Like, you know, I had a chance. You know, the Laper family, I played with Chris Laper. I mean, you talk about someone who covered ground in center field. He was 10 years older than me, but he could move. And playing, there were guys who were on the team from Tonawanda, Rich Winatowski, who, you know, played basketball and baseball in Tonawanda. You know, he would stand on the mound. He's 6'10", you know, and trying to catch him and being, you know, able to catch him. It was great for me with baseball, but it was also great for me to be around older people who had kind of, I don't want to say been there, done that, but had an opportunity to do that. They coached me a lot along the way about being a person, also just, you know, what I need to do as a player. So after college, I had a tough time. I didn't hang him up right away. I went back and played on that men's team for another 3 years. When that got to be something I couldn't manage, I started playing the softball route and quickly realized that, you know, other than the Glory B tournament a couple of years, that wasn't, I knew that wasn't where I was. But fortunately for me, I had decided when I was in college, I started off as a business major and then added an education major. So I had an opportunity to get into the classroom myself, probably because of some of the things I shared with you already. Some of the men in my life outside of my family who meant the most were coaches and teachers. And so I had a chance. I went back and I was Coach Eberwine's JV coach first I was Coach Merlot's assistant, and then I was a JV coach for Coach Eberwine when Coach Merlot stopped coaching. I had a chance to do some teaching in the classroom at NT. I was a sub, and believe it or not, I was a long-term sub in a Spanish classroom. At that point in time, I knew Spanish, and then was able to continue teaching in a couple other places and coaching. So, I never really got away from the sport, which I think really helped me transition away from being a player and then having an opportunity to coach it at the high school level back in NT for a short period of time. And then once I moved out here to the Philadelphia area, and then in my late 20s, I had the opportunity, I became an athletic director. So my career arc, I've really never been that far away from athletics. I did that, and I was able to do that for 5 or 6 years before I moved into different layers of administration, first at the high school level, and I was a middle school principal, and things have kind of evolved. I'm now a superintendent in district in Pennsylvania. And, those things I think, reflecting, I have 5 children. Some of them are out of college already. My son, he's the youngest of the 5 kids. He's got 4 older sisters, because you can imagine what that's like for him. But, he's getting into baseball now. He's entering his freshman year. He's been playing now, and he has the ability to do really well with it. And it's fun watching him kind of as that next generation, being able to talk with him. He's also a catcher, whether that was because of me or just, it's where his talent lies. But it's been really nice having a chance to watch him and have him get to, experience some of the things that I started to experience as well. And I think as a father, and as an educator, those are the things that you really want to see, is people you're around do really well on their own. And, just hope that maybe you had a little bit of a positive influence somewhere along the way.
With your son, do you offer advice, or does he pick your brains?
I got to tell you, it's tough because you want to say what needs to be said, but you also want to respect the coach who's with your kid. And maybe I'm fortunate because having been a catcher and having done it for a long time, I might know some of the more technical stuff. I would certainly not feel comfortable teaching him how to be a shortstop or an outfielder. I never did that. I don't know it. So he'll listen to his coaches. He definitely respects his coaches. He works really hard at it. But every now and again, I'll see something and just, if it won't be during the game, but usually it's on the ride home. And then it ends up being maybe 5 minutes in the backyard working on something technique wise. And then he just implements it. So it's fun watching my son play. It was really fun watching all of his older sisters. They were all involved in athletics in different ways as well. And it's fun watching him kind of take those steps that, as we've been talking, that I remember when I was 13, 14 years old, how that feels, and just, the excitement for what's going to be next for him.
You talk about all the wonderful coaches and teachers you had at NT and probably at Ohio University as well, too. What did you get from those people, and what have you implemented in your career as a superintendent nowadays?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the things, and I'll go back, I kind of mentioned it right off the bat with Coach Burke and Coach Anastasi about, they just did things the right way. They didn't have any trouble making what might have seemed like hard decisions because they always knew they were doing the right thing. And that's something that always stuck with me. I mean, I tell the story, like Coach Eberwine, the man meant the world to me, and, I remember it was my freshman year when we were doing sprints in the gym, and, I was a freshman playing JV, I was the only one. It was kind of cool. And he noticed that when I was doing the one set of wind sprints, we were doing line drills basically as a team, I kind of let up a little bit earlier than I should have. And he told me about it, and he called me on it. And there were no hard feelings. There was nothing about, oh, I'm going to carry a grudge. It was just basically what he was telling me there at that moment was, I expect more from you. You're better than that. And the coaches that have meant the most to me have been the ones who always found a way to take that, get me to take that next step. maybe when I was tired, maybe when I didn't think I could do something, maybe I just wasn't seeing something, they always found a way to make it happen. And I think, I don't know if I've been as good a teacher for others as they were for me. I'd like to think that I've done some good things. But those were the lessons that I always tried to take from those experiences. You do the right thing for the right reasons. You're honest with people. And when it's time to lead, you lead, and sometimes you make mistakes, and when you do, you just own them, and that's, baseball, what do they say? You can fail 7 times out of 10 and still be in the Hall of Fame. That baseball as a sport teaches you a lot about failure and getting up. And I think those lessons meant a lot as I was growing up, and I've hopefully been able to demonstrate those as I've gotten older and been around other people as well.
What do you tell people about growing up in North Tonawanda and Western New York?
I still like coming home, and it's different now. I'm in my early 50s. I pretty much, between going away to college after my senior year in high school, because I played college baseball, I was away during most of the summers. I was home for a few years, and I took my first job in Wellsville. I've really pretty much been gone from the area since probably like 96-ish, 97. But every time you cross the bridge by what used to be DeGraff Hospital, you feel like you're home, and that's never, I don't think, going to change. Some of the names on some of the marquees on the businesses are a little bit different now. The houses all look the same. I told you my mom is still living in the same house basically I was born in. We moved into it when I was 5 months old, and it's still the same house. And so growing up in NT, that was one of the things that you just knew. You had family there. You had friends there. People knew you. People cared. I was a paper boy for 5.5 years growing up. This is when you delivered papers on your own with the bag over your shoulder, and you had to go and collect. Nowadays, you don't even have to collect, but going in and talking to people. And then as I was getting into high school, people started asking, how's baseball doing? How's the football game? I watched you guys on Friday night. What happened on this, that, and the other play? And these were people who I didn't even know watched football, but they asked questions, and it really, to me, represented a community that cared about itself. It looked out for each other. And those were some of the lessons that I saw in the guys I got to know. We all had parents, who were home with us and came to events. There were never enough bleachers at the baseball games when we were growing up. Everybody had to bring lawn chairs and sit around the backstop because there wasn't enough space. And that was family. The whole community was part of who you were and what you were doing. And, I know other places say that that's what a hometown is like, but I've just always felt like NT was a little bit unique that way. And then having Tonawanda right across the canal, that was something that was also unique, because I'll call it my first real job after being a paper boy, was at Mississippi Muds along the Niagara River. Well, working at Mississippi Muds, most of the people I worked with were from Tonawanda, so I got to know them not just through sports, but I got to know them, basically cooking French fries and flipping burgers. We were, in the same kitchen together. It was, and everybody in that area is a lot more similar than they're different. And there just continues to be that sense of, this is my hometown. This is where I grew up, and obviously things change, and, NT is not what it was 30 something years ago. And, but it's still home, and it will always be that.
You were inducted into the North Tonawanda Wall of Fame. What does that honor mean to you today?
Honestly, that was probably one of the more humbling experiences that I was able to have. That was, I was introduced into the Hall of Fame by Coach Eberwine, and rest his soul. Mrs. Eberwine gave me the opportunity to do that when he was inducted into the Wall of Fame, about a year and a half ago, to read his introductory speech. It meant a lot. I was inducted with Dan Paulson, who, for those of you who don't know, Dan was all-state in football and in wrestling. He was a wrestling state champion. And being able to earn that honor and be inducted with someone who had such accomplishment as well, is something that I'll honestly never forget. It was a really special day for my family. My wife, and at that time, my 5-week-old were not able to be there at the ceremony. And so, I had brought our video camera and didn't realize the battery wasn't fully charged. So as that was happening, my brother was taking the video, and then about halfway through, I saw him put the camera down. And afterwards, I asked him, like, what happened? He goes, "You idiot! You didn't charge the battery." So I'm like, oh my gosh. But as a ceremony, being there with family and being recognized by, as I said earlier, the town you grew up in, the place that really meant a lot to you growing up, having that group of people tell you through that award that you did pretty well. I think that's something that is really important. It's something that when we go home every now and again, we'll go and we'll walk into the building. I feel that building's been renovated 17 times since I left, but looking at the plaque on the wall, and now that there's the electronic board there, I think, the people who are trying to, influence that and make that a part of everyone's experience, it really is humbling, because it's a relatively small number of people who've earned that distinction. And I think it means a lot more about how I grew up, who my family was, and the people who had an influence on me over the years, that I was really able to earn that. And I really think it's as much a recognition for all of those people who I've mentioned as we've been talking as it is for me. So it's really special. It's something that will always be there. But like I said, I think it's just as much about the people who helped me get there as me getting there myself.
We've talked about several things during this conversation. What would you like to talk about that I haven't brought up?
There really isn't a whole lot that we haven't covered, Ed. I really appreciate what you're doing for the Hall of Fame and making these opportunities available. I guess, thinking about, where I came from in NT, where I am now, anything's possible for anyone. I don't want to sound cliched, and I don't want to sound, strange about this, but my parents provided everything that I needed, and I didn't know until I got to be a parent the sacrifices that they made for us to have what we had. Playing hockey is expensive. Spending the amount of time that they spent carting me and my brother around and doing the things we did, they made a lot of sacrifices, and I never knew it at the time because it was something that they really thought was important. Obviously they cared a ton about my brother and I, but my grandparents were at games. I had aunts and uncles at games. And that was something that, I know that not everybody is going to have that same family experience, but over time, I think people can still accomplish really, really good things. Even if at the beginning they don't realize that they might have it in them. And I just would encourage people just to continue trying to become all that they can be. And when you see someone who needs a little bit of help, I'm thinking of my coaches now, you never had to ask them. They did what they did because it was the right thing and because somebody needed it. Franny Burke never had to be asked to provide you with some motivation. Coach Anastasi never had to be asked to give you something that you could do better. And I just think sometimes it gets easy to maybe get wrapped up in what we're doing as individuals. And I think, we might all be a little bit better off. And I think it's what made NT so special, that people really legitimately cared about each other and wanted everybody to become their best. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. And I just hope that people realize that even if it's something little, there's always something you can do that's going to matter to somebody else.
One final question. In the history of North Tonawanda athletics, how should Mike Snopkowski be remembered?
Oh, goodness. I'd like to hope people thought I was a good teammate, that they could count on me, that I was someone who did everything he could to help the team be successful. And I hope people also recognize that, we talked about it a little bit. You don't have to sacrifice being a good student to be a good athlete. You can do both. And those things together, I think, can make you into hopefully a pretty good person that's good for others. So I hope that's what people would remember about me. And, we can settle the urban legend. I was never drafted by the Dodgers.
Mike Snopkowski, this has been a lot of fun. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for sharing those memories and going down memory lane. I wish you well. Once again, thank you.
I appreciate it, Ed. I hope you have a great afternoon.